Everyone, it's Boy, the PSC for Economics. Today we are going to focus in grade 11's work, and specifically we'll look at the short run costs. We know that a business can incur short run costs or long run costs. We'll look at the difference between the two before we go on with the short run costs. And while I'm here, I want to remind you also to remember that the reason why businesses are in business, especially profit-making businesses in the first place, is because they want to make profit. And when you look at this, it aligns itself with what we normally say about the laws of demand and supply. You remember that when you talk about demand, you'll say the consumers will buy more when the price is cheaper because that's when they are benefiting. The same with the producers. They will only supply more if they can get more money. So they do the opposite. When the price is high, then they want to supply more because that is when they get maximum benefit from that. And therefore, for them to ascertain that, they also need to know how much they have actually spent in order to make their product available. Hence, in microeconomics, we also look at the different costs, and let us just look at that. But before we do that, I want us to establish if what we are doing is actually there. There is our dynamics of markets, price elasticity, right? And then we have our cost and revenue curves. There we have it, dynamics of markets. We have here, they say we must be able to explain the objectives, or the learners must be able to do this with our help, of course. They must be able to do the objectives of the business, why businesses are in business. Like I said, the reason is because they want to make profit. And then we'll look at the short run costs that they incur, and there's long run costs. And today, because of time, we'll only do the short run costs when we look at the total, the average, and the marginal cost schedules. And next time, we'll now look at the curves. Right, with that done, establishing if what we are doing is supposed to be done, let's go to our real content now. For now, like we said, we'll first, before we even start with our short run and our long run, we'll look at what is the difference between the two. Right, it says the short run, at least one input is fixed. Cost curves are operating curves. And then in the long run, all inputs are variable. Cost curves are planning curves. What does this mean? Let me make an example. What do they mean when they say at least one input is fixed? Remember, when the producer produces, the items that are used in order to, or the cost incurred in order to make the product available. For an example, if say a firm is producing, let me think of like maize meal, for an example. They'll need the labor, they'll need a place where to do this, they'll need the machineries, and those are all inputs in order to produce the output. Remember, the output will now be our product. Now, all these elements or all these factors that are needed in the production process, now, at least one of them, one or two, will then be fixed. It means whether we are producing or not, we'll have this one input that will still pay for, even irrespective of how much we are producing. That is what is meant by one input is fixed. Now, in the long run, then we say all inputs are variable. In other words, they can be manipulated, or they can be increased or decreased. For the same example that I have just used now, would say, I said to you, the price of the machinery will stay the same. I said to you, how much we pay for the rent will stay the same when I was talking about the short run. But if we were to be in the long run, where we say all variables are, all inputs are variable, then it means we can change the machinery by the latest one. We can hire a bigger renting or rent a bigger space or whatever the case may be. So the short and the long run is not about 12 months, 6 months or whatever. It is about what is it that can be done to change the inputs in order to have an output. I hope that is understood. Right. Fixed costs incurred even if the firm produces nothing. That is what we have just explained and made use of an example. Variable costs change with the level of output. So what are variable costs? It means whenever you produce, the material that you use will determine the output that you are going to make. Say, for an example, let's stick to the same example so the understanding flows nicely. We talked about the production of the maize meal. Now it means the more you will need more maize in order to produce more maize meal. Otherwise, with the same amount of maize, you cannot produce increased maize. That is why it becomes a variable cost. If you are making, say, clothes, you can't make 100 dresses with the same material and make 200 dresses with the same size of the material. So you have to increase your material. That is why they say the variable cost will change with the level of output. Right. Now I want us to look at the different concepts that are there when we determine the cost or when the business determines costs. We have cost is the value of the input used to produce its output. I think we have explained this, e.g. the firm hires labor and the cost is the wage rate that must be paid to the labor. So it means the cost is what you have incurred in order to make the goods available. Right, we have different costs like the total cost. What is the total cost? The total cost is the full cost of producing any given level of output. It is divided into two. So in other words, total cost is all that you have paid in order to make the output available. And these costs are either fixed or are variable, like we have already said. We explained that the fixed cost is not dependent on how many units you are producing. And then the total variable cost is the part of the total cost that changes directly with the output. So it is dependent, the amount you produce will be dependent on, the output you produce will be dependent on the cost of the variable factor, like we have made use of example of the maize meal as well as the making of dresses. And you can make use of many other examples. Right, let's look at these costs. We have also what we call the average total cost. Remember, we talked about the total cost, we talked about the fixed cost, and we talked about the variable costs. Now, we also have what we call the average total cost. Is the total cost per unit of the output. When you want to sell, you will more or less want to know, because you are not selling all your items together. So you need to know, if I'm going to sell the products that I have, more or less, how much did each one of them cost me? Hence, we do the average. Remember, we also do the average when you look at the learner's marks. Remember, we'll take the total marks, and then what do we do to the marks? We divide them by the number of learners. And we say approximately, more or less, this is what the marks are per learner. That is the average. Okay, that average total cost is the total cost per unit of the output. There we have average total cost is then the total cost, and then we divide that by number of outputs. In the same way, when I made use of an example, perhaps not relevant to this, but making it easier for you to understand when you talk about the marks and then we talk about the number of learners. So more or less, I think that was much more closer home, especially for the learners to understand. Right, and then what is the average fixed cost? It is the fixed cost per unit of the output. Now we estimate more or less of the fixed cost that we have paid. How much of that can we apportion to an individual item? And the average fixed cost therefore would be equal to the total fixed cost divided the units of output. And the average variable cost is the variable cost per unit of an output. I hope we understand that. So it means here we have, if you realize, here we have the total fixed cost, and then we have here the total variable cost. And the two, remember we said the fixed cost and the variable cost will give us the total cost, right? And then what is the marginal cost then? Or what they call incremental cost. It is the increase in the total cost resulting from the increase in the level of output by 1 unit. So how do we determine this marginal cost or the extra cost that we incur? We have the change in total cost divided by the change in total quantity. What is a change? If you remember what a change is, we have always been doing the changes, I think, in some of the aspects that we have done. Okay, that was in grade 12. But what happens if we talk about, I have 10 rand now, but yesterday I had 5 rand. Then if I talk about the change, then I'll say the 10 rand I have minus the 5 rand that I had yesterday, the difference will be the 5 rand. More or less, that is the change. So you look at from where you come from and where you are and what is the difference between the two. That is basically that what a change is. Now, when we look at the marginal cost, then we say it is the change in total cost and then the change in total output. Right. I hope this issue of change is also now very clear. It will not make it difficult for you when you have to do your calculations. Since some of the total costs are fixed costs which do not change as the level of output changes, marginal cost is also equal to increase in variable costs that result when output increases by 1 unit. Right. Now, I want us to, I hope I have tried to make the concepts clear to you and that we are going to explain, because if you understand these concepts and you are able to actually use them in your calculation, then when you go to your graphs, it will be very easy for you to understand the graphs. Remember, a schedule is actually where we take the information from in order to plot the graphs. Now, when you are already, say, in grade 12, at times we are not necessarily using the schedule most of the time. Then you have the graph. But if you have understood how to plot the graphs from the beginning, then it becomes very easy for you to actually understand how the graphs were generated or they were plotted, even if now we don't have the quantities anymore. Right. Let us look at how we are able to look at this cost that we have talked about. Now, remember here, where we have the quantity of houses, it could be a production of any other item. So it will not always be like quantity of houses. We can have something like quantity of chairs, quantity of desks, quantity of cars, or whatever it is that. And then we look at labor units, how many people have been used in order to produce these items. Remember, we are still busy looking at the costs that are incurred by the business in order to make the goods available. That is the inputs, and then in order to sell the goods, when they sell the goods, the reason why they're selling goods is actually to maximize or make a lot of profit. Right. Now, when we look at this one, we have the fixed cost, which is 50,000. Why are we having the 50,000 fixed cost when we have not built a single house here? You see, no house was made. Remember, we said the fixed costs are not dependent on the number of units that are produced. So whether we have produced or we have not produced, we incur the fixed costs, or the business incurs the fixed cost. I like saying we because normally I say when you do this, look at yourself as the business, then it becomes easier for you to relate to what is happening. Right, the variable costs, remember we said the variable costs will be related to the output that is being made. So now here, we have not used, say, mortar, we have not used any of the gravel, we have not used any of the variable costs that we need to produce the houses. So as a result then, our total variable cost will be 0. But what is our total cost? Our total cost is 50. And what did we say our total cost is? We said our total cost would be when we add our variable cost and our fixed cost. Let's go back to our explanation and see if that is what we said. Look, total fixed cost. Let me see. Where did they explain that? We said total cost would be the total fixed cost and the total variable cost. Right, let's go back to what we are busy with now. Right, now we have a one house that has been now made or built. Now what happens here? We used 5 units of labor. The cost, the fixed cost, whether we have a house now or not, we still pay the 50,000. Right. And if we used the variable costs, like we use the sand, we use the water, we use all these things that will depend, and the number of houses will depend on how much of the variable cost we have used. Then we have used here 50,000. So what has happened to the total cost? Our total cost is now 100,000 because we have added the 50 of the fixed cost and the 50 of the variable costs. Now, how much more or less the house that we have built would cost us? Remember we said we check our average fixed cost and our average variable costs. And then we look at what we said, what would be our marginal cost. Our marginal cost, therefore, would be the difference. Now we go back and see. How did we say we calculate the marginal cost? Let's go back. We said the marginal cost would be the change in the total cost divided by the change in the total quantity. Now, how many houses have we built? 1. Now, how much total cost have we incurred? We have our total cost then is the 100. But how much cost did we incur? Remember what we said? We said we look at the change in total cost. So if there's a change in total cost, what I said at the beginning would be, where were you? Where were you? Where are you now? What is the difference between the two? Then you'll say it is 100 minus 50. And then because you remember, we said, let me just go easy. We said it's the change over the quantity over the change in price. Now we'll have a bracket here where we have the 100 minus 50, which gives us 50. But we didn't have any house before this. So it is one house minus when we didn't have a house. So basically it will be the 50,000 divided by 1, which gives us the 50,000. I hope we understand each other here, because then our average fixed cost and our variable cost is now at 100,000. Right, let's look at the next one. If we build 2 houses, the number of units of labor is 9. Then what did we do? We used our fixed cost that we have incurred is 50,000. And now the variable cost has increased to 90,000. And if our variable cost and our fixed cost equal to our total cost, then this 140 must be the variable costs of producing the item as well as the fixed cost that we have used, and then that will give us the total cost. Now, we said what is the average fixed cost. Let's go back and look at what did we say the average fixed cost is. We said an average fixed cost is the total fixed cost divided by the number of units that we have produced. Because what are we looking at here? We are trying to say more or less of the fixed cost. How much can we apportion to one unit? That is why we look at the total fixed cost. Now we go back to our graph. I hope you understand this. Now we go back to our graph. We say, what is the fixed cost? We have our fixed cost here, which is the 50,000. And how much must we divide the 50,000 with? Remember what I said about the average, the number of units produced. Remember what I said also? I said the number of learners who have written, say, the test that you are working on. The same here. The number of houses that we have produced would give us an average of more or less how much of the fixed cost can we apportion to the unit. So we take the 50,000, we divide by the number, which is 2. So what are we looking at here? We are looking at the average fixed cost. We said when we look at the average fixed cost, then we take the fixed cost, we divide it by the number of units, and that is the 50,000. We must divide it by the number of houses that are there, which is 2. Then it gives us the 25,000. Now we say the average variable cost. Now we said the average variable cost will be the total variable cost divided by the number of units. But let us go back and check if that is what we said. We said the average variable cost is the variable cost per unit of the output. So the average variable cost will be the total variable cost divided by the number of units. So what are we trying to do here? We are trying to apportion per unit the variable cost. So let's go back. Right, here we are again. We look at our average variable cost. Then there is our total variable cost. That is the 90,000. I hope you can see this. I'm just doing this for especially for the learners. And then we divide by 2, and we have the average variable cost then becomes the 45,000. But now remember this one will not be so difficult, the average total cost, because an average total cost will be adding your variable and your fixed to get your total. But in this case, we are looking at the average. Let's look at what did they say the average total cost is. I'm deliberately going between the presentations so that I hope this will sink in. Average total cost, we said, is the addition of the average variable cost and average fixed cost. Let's go and check if that is actually true. We said the average total cost. There, the average total cost is the total cost divided by the number of units, right? The number of units. So if you, the total cost divided by the number of units is the same as what I've just said. Let us just look at it. Where is our total cost? There is our total cost. Our total cost. Let's see if we can get our calculator back. Let's see if we can get our calculator back and put it where it won't disturb us. Right. What are we looking at for now? We are looking at the average total cost, right? And then what is our total cost? Our total cost in this case is 140, right? And then how much must we divide by? We must divide by the number of units that we have produced. There we have our average total cost. But now we must also do our marginal cost. What did we say our marginal cost is? We said our marginal cost will be the change in the cost and then divided that by the number of units. Let's go back. What did we say the marginal cost is? You need to remember this always. Your change in your total cost over the change in the quantity that you have produced. That will give you the cost of the extra unit that has been produced. Very important, you need to always remember that. So this is where we must be now. And then we look at what is our total cost. Our total cost, let's take this one away. We say our total cost now is 140,000. Remember, you can't use that one. Now our starting point when we are here would be the 100,000. Very important. You make a lot of mistakes when you have to do that. Is the 140 minus the, how many zeros do I have now? Right, it is correct. It gives us this, it gives you the 40,000. It's easy to give us the 40,000. Why is it giving us the 40,000 so easily? Is because we have the 140 minus 100. Remember, you do your brackets first, so that would give us 40. The same here is 2 minus 1, which gives us 1. So anything that you divide by 1, it will give you the same figure. Hence, we get the 40. But otherwise, we have a bracket of 140 minus 100 and a bracket of 2 minus 1, which we divide with. And that must give us that. And therefore, it's giving us that easily because then our change is 1. So we are dividing with 1. Maybe I should take one more example. Let's take one more example, just not following them in sequence. Let us just take maybe number 4. Right, if we do number 4 here, how many labors do we have? We have 16 units of labor. And how many houses are being built? 4 houses. And when we have the 4 houses, how much do we have to pay whether we like or not? That is the 50,000. But look at what has happened to your raw materials or your variable costs. As we produce 4 houses now, you need more of the variable cost or more of the raw materials or the inputs, including your labor. You are now using more people than when you were building one house. You only used 5 people. So your input actually, let us put it that way and not say raw material, let's say the input. Now you need the 5 workers. But when you build 4 houses, you now need 16 people in order to be able to do that. But whether you are making or building 0 or 4 houses, you still are going to pay the 50,000 as the producer, or we as the producers must pay that. The variable cost has increased. Now, what will be the total amount that is being incurred as a cost? You just add. Let me just do it practically. Talking might not give you what you want to know. It's 50,000, and then we must add to the 50,000 160,000, and that gives us the 210, which is our total cost. But now, if you want to know of this 210, how much can we apportion more or less to each of the houses? Then we take the 210 and say we divide it then by the number of houses that we wanted to build. Then it must give us our average fixed cost. What did we do here? Let's see. Our total cost. What happened? What happened? Oh, I see. I used the total cost. But what am I looking for? You see how we easily make mistakes. I'm looking for the average fixed cost. I'm not looking at the average total cost. So what is the mistake that I made? I used the total cost. And now I can see I'm looking for average fixed cost. There is my fixed cost. And my fixed cost is how much? It's good that I made this mistake. 50,000. And the 50,000, we say more or less how many houses did we build? We built 4 houses. So on average, the fixed cost apportioned will be 12,500. But how much of the variable cost can we apportion to one house? Remember, very important. Can you see? It's easy to make mistakes when you are not really looking at what you're doing. Then we look at what is our variable cost. In this case, our variable cost is there 160 and then we must divide that by what? The number of houses, and that will then give us the 40,000. But if you want to have our variable cost, total, average total cost, and if we add the two, it will actually also give you this. Let's check, am I right or am I right? 43. And it is giving this, your total average cost, because it's the combination of the two. Now we talk about the marginal cost. What did we say the marginal cost is? We said the marginal cost will be your total cost. We said it will be, is our calculator again. Oh, what happened to the calculator? Okay, let's look at the calculator and say, let's put it somewhere. We are using the different units now. We are using the different units now. What was it first? Before? Okay, now I'm quiet. There, it's giving you your marginal cost. But remember, then it is actually your total cost that you have, and the total cost that you had divided by what you have produced now as opposed to what you produced previously, and that gives you then your extra cost for the unit that you produced. But I want you to look at something now. As we were going on and on and on, our marginal cost was 50,000. So it cost us 50,000 to produce the extra unit. Then it cost us 40,000 to produce the extra unit. It cost us 30,000 to produce the extra unit. And now, as we increase our production, what happens to our marginal cost? 40 is bigger than 30, so it means our costs are increasing. And when you are at building of 5, what has happened? The quantity of houses is 5. What happened to the cost? We have the 50,000 marginal cost, and the marginal cost is increasing. And this will be nicely demonstrated when we do our graphs. And once you understand this, then it means when you go to grade 12, you will not have a problem to show that your marginal cost is up, it goes down, at some point it goes up again. Now we'll do that when we do our graphs. But for now, I wanted us just to understand how the schedule works. I hope this schedule has made it clear for you to understand how you need to do the calculation. Once you understand how do you do your total cost, how do you do your variable cost, how do you do your fixed cost, and how do you calculate them, not do them, but calculate them in order to know how much has been incurred. Then you'll know, okay, as a business, this is how much I have incurred as total amount that I have actually paid to make the item available. But now, you don't sell like that, you sell per unit, and therefore you need to average to know more or less what is the cost per unit apportioned, say, as per variable and as per fixed cost, and what is more or less the total cost per unit then. And therefore, what will cost you to produce an extra unit. And now, if I was to explain this shortly to you, it's like if I was to, drawing is not my strong point. Okay, if suppose this was just our area of production, and if this was our area of production, we hire people, they work in this factory. Let's just take this one. That is what am I doing now? Okay, I must end the slideshow so that I can work in the slide. Now I'm trying to use this as my factory. Now, if this was my factory and I can't increase my factory in the short run, then I hire one person. Then I hire another one. Okay, we are doing nicely, we are getting more money, and then we hire, and then we hire, and then we go on, we hire more people. As we hire more people, what happens? The cost of producing does not become less, because now they are not being as productive as they would in that given space. And that is why when they say in the short run, one of the unit is not able to change, and that would be resulting in this. This is just a sort of a pictorial way of making you understand what could have happened, because the more you hire, the more eventually it is not going to yield results. It is only going to cost you more for producing any other extra unit. That's basically, in a simple language, the explanation of why now the cost of an extra unit is suddenly being too much, right? But we'll do that again next time when we are drawing the graphs. Let us just do one practice activity to see if what I have explained to you in terms of the different costs that are incurred in order to ascertain how much has been paid to make the product available. If you were to have this as your practice activity, and I would ask you, or you as a learner, or you would ask your learners as a teacher, and want to know what is the fixed cost here. It's not written, it's blank, but you know that what is the total cost. You know that total cost would be your fixed cost plus your variable costs. And then in this case, what has happened, right, you need to play around with these figures until you know them, and then you can, from here, we'll do the plotting. That will not do today though. Right, when you look at this, they say the total cost is 130 and the variable cost is 30. So what does that mean? It means of the 130, if we remove the variable cost, then 100 will be then our fixed cost, and therefore we'll have 100. But this 100, because we said a fixed cost is not changing whether you produce or not, it will therefore all the way we will have our fixed cost being 100. I hope you understand that. And then we are supposed to calculate the marginal cost. But what did we say the marginal cost is? We said the marginal cost would be your original, what you are producing now, the total cost thereof, divided by the change in the quantity. The change in total cost divided by change in quantity. Can we go to the total cost again? We said the marginal cost, sorry, not the total, the marginal cost. We said the marginal cost is the change in total cost divided by a change in the output. Right, the change in total cost, there is the 130, but we didn't have anything before this, and then we producing one quantity of whatever item we can want to name it, and therefore our marginal cost must therefore be the average fixed cost. We said the average fixed cost will be our total fixed cost divided by the number of units. We must have 100, and then the average variable cost, we take the total variable cost, and then we divide by the quantity. It must give us 30. Remember what we said here. We said our average will be our variable cost. We focus on the variable cost divided by the number of units that we have produced. That will give us our average variable cost. Let's look at it again. Average variable cost, average variable cost is total variable cost by the number of units. Average fixed cost, total fixed cost by the number of units. So we're still doing okay. Average variable cost, where is our average variable cost? Is the 30. And we divide by the number of units that we have produced. We only produced 1 unit, so that gives us 30. And therefore our average total cost is there, average fixed cost as well as total cost. It must be our average variable cost, which is the 30, and our average fixed cost is the 100, and therefore it gives us the 130. Here again we have the average total cost. Now if you want the average total cost, here it means we must write what are we supposed to do to get the average total cost. We must have our average variable cost plus our average fixed cost. In this case we'll have the 50, let's write it as it is written there, plus the 25. Right, this must give us the average total cost of, and right here 75. Right here we have another blank space here. What is this? Is the total cost. If it is the total cost, then what must we do? We take the 100, we add the 60, it must give us the 160. Now what is short here? Remember what we did when we were calculating the, we didn't have the fixed cost. Now we don't have the variable cost, but we have the total cost. But what did we say the total cost was? We said the total cost will be your variable cost, and your fixed cost give you your total cost. So in order for us to fill that one, we need to say 16 minus the fixed cost. This is our fixed cost. Therefore, what is variable in this case will then be 65. Right, there you have it again. And then remember always to know what is it that you are doing. Always remember what you are doing. A change in your total cost over your change in output again. What do we say? The marginal, the extra unit that we have produced. What is our total cost in this case? Our total cost, total cost in this case will be 165. And then what did we have? Total change in the total cost. Change, remember where we were, and then where we are now, and the difference between the two, it will be 165. Therefore minus 60, it gives us the 5. And then when you look at the 5, we must divide that by 4 minus 1, which is it gives us, there's somewhere where we made a mistake. There's somewhere where we made a mistake. I think so. Right, then we have the 5 as our extra cost. Somewhere here, I think we made a mistake. I'm not sure what we did not do. There's something we did. Okay, let's go on. I'll check. I'm not sure what is it that I did not do right. Right. And then where do we again have a blank space? We have a blank space here at the average fixed cost. And then the average fixed cost, do we have the, right, we have the average total cost. But now I think we don't have two things here. We don't have the average fixed cost as well as the average variable cost, which will make it a bit difficult for us to do this one, because we must take the average variable cost. The average variable cost will take the total variable cost divided by the number of units. Okay, let's go and do it and see the average variable cost. We take our average, we're looking at the variable, the average variable cost. Where is our total variable cost? Where are we starting? Okay, let's start with the fixed cost first. Where is the fixed cost? There is the fixed cost. The fixed cost is 100. It's 100. We must divide by, where are we now? We are at units 4. We are at unit 4. And therefore it gives us here the average fixed cost would be will be 25. Let's write it here. It will be 25. Then we are looking for the average variable cost. And then the average variable cost, what is our variable cost? It's 65. And then we go and say 65 divided by average, the number of units divided by 4. And this gives us, it gives us 16,25. It gives us 16,25. Right. Now we go to the, where are we now? This one will still be the same, 190 minus 100. Then this one must then be 90 there. And then if we are supposed to do the marginal cost, what did you say the marginal cost is? The difference between the two, the difference between the two. So the difference between these two would be therefore yes, it will be the difference 190 minus 175. That is what we are supposed to do. Right, there you are. We say, where is the calculator now? The calculator, we say 190 minus 175. There we have it. It's 15. But remember, we must say also 6 minus 5 is 1. But basically, it will still give us 15. Right. And then we look at the last ones. The last ones, this one is 100 plus 110. Obviously, it will give us 210, I suppose. Right, and then we go to the average variable cost. Where is our variable cost? Our variable cost is 110. Let's go back. It's 110. So it is 110 divided by The variable cost is 110. How many units have we produced here? We have produced 7. So it gives us about 15,7 here. It gives us about 15,7. Right, and we're doing the average total cost. The average total cost, we can actually just take the total cost and divide by the number of units, or we can add the 2. So let's go and do that. The total cost, which is 210, we're looking for an average of how many units? Of 7 units, which gives us 30. Right, can we take a 5 minutes break? Thank you. Right, thank you. Let's go back and check our calculations then. We said we have the different quantities. The the cost will be fixed, and then we have our variable costs, and our total cost will therefore be our fixed cost plus our variable costs. Then we have our marginal cost, which is now, although we can use the total cost, like we said in our formula, when we calculate the first unit, I think somewhere here we made a mistake here. We should have had 30 units, because the 30 units that we have would be due to, say, the increase in our variable costs that would lead to the production of the marginal of an extra unit. So therefore we have our marginal cost as 30. I hope you understand that, because we said this is due to an extra unit that we have produced. And then we have our average cost, our average fixed cost, which we look at what was our fixed cost, what was the number of units we produced. And average variable cost, we go back and look what was our variable cost and how many units did we produce, to apportion that part of the variable cost, this portion of the variable cost to the 1 unit. Therefore we get the 30. And then our average total cost, which will give us therefore the 130. And then the average total cost would be our average fixed cost, and our average variable cost will give us the 130. And then when we produce the second unit, this is fixed, and our total variable cost is 50, and our total cost is 150. We can either use this or this to get to our marginal cost, the extra cost of the unit that we have produced, which is therefore the 150 minus the 130, or the 50 minus the 30, that must give us the 20. And our average fixed cost would be our fixed cost divided by the number of units, which is 2, to give us the 25 average variable cost. And our average total cost will then be the combination of the average variable cost and our average fixed cost, which is the 75. And we go to the third one, same fixed cost, total variable cost, total cost, the combination of the two, the marginal cost, the difference between the two divided by 1, or the difference between the two divided by 1, giving us 10. And then the average fixed cost, we go back to our fixed cost, we divide by the number of units that we have produced. It must give us this. The average variable cost, therefore, again, we said we go back and look for the total variable cost, which is the 60. And then how many units did we produce? 3. We divide by that, then it gives us this. And the average total cost, like we said, If we add the two, it must give us our average total cost, which is the combination of our averages of the variable and the fixed cost. As we go on, they must keep on giving us more or less the same amount of cost as we have done. And then what guides you, what will make you know that something is wrong, is when you see an outline kind of number. Then you know somewhere you have actually made a mistake when you are doing your calculations, and you have not used the rationale that we use when we do the different costs. Because then if you don't use the rationale that your total variable cost, that will be for producing the one extra unit, then you realize something must have gone wrong somewhere. Right. Now when we go to our fixed cost, remember it will always be 100. And when we do our long run, you'll realize that we'll not have the fixed cost, but we'll do that sometime. For now, let us call it a day, and then from what we have done today, we will use this schedule of ours to go and plot this in our graph. And thank you so much. Thank you, guys.